today, or I am here today, I should say, because I'm missing my counterpart, Jacob. I'm here today with Shaneeria Persaud. And Shaneeria, you are one of the contributors to the text. So thank you so much for your contribution and for being here today. Um, so your contribution was about microaggressions.
Yeah.
And just to kind of get started, can you talk a little bit about what microaggressions are and maybe clear up the definition for some people who might be not so clear on what it is?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Michelle and Jacob, who's your counterpart, is not here just as yet, for inviting me to contribute to this awesome work. So my contribution was on microaggressions. And so for those who may not understand what microaggressions are very subtle, almost candy coated acts of racism that contribute to the dehumanization um, of Black people, Indigenous people of color.
And would you say with microaggressions, are they always intentional? Could it be something that's sort of like a harmless comment, maybe that somebody makes, not realizing that there's something beneath the surface?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Microaggressions, they can be micro assaults, micro insults, or micro invalidations. And those micro insults, and sometimes the micro invalidations can be unbeknownst to the perpetrator or to the person who's giving the comment, right? For example, like typical in the workplace, if a Black person is late to a meeting, and somebody makes a comment about, well, that's just how those people are. Maybe they don't understand that is a micro insult, but it is, because it diminishes how that person, what has caused that person to be late, and it also emphasizes on a very, very, very small act of tardiness, right? It increases this, like it increases tardiness like it's a failure. So um it's very easy for people, especially if they don't self-examine, to to be uh to be racist and admit microaggressions to others.
So all of those overgeneralizations that people might make, that would be an example of a microaggression or a micro insult.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talk about that. I think I talked about that in the chapters, like, contributing to stereotypes is a huge form of microaggression, because stereotypes um, don't hold to the entire population, and so to put that on somebody um, is a very very obvious form of microaggression.
And the point that you made about somebody being late to a meeting, they could have left in time, had everything going right, and then got a flat tire, right? So it had nothing to do with the color of their skin or
Yeah.
their ethnicity, but an unfortunate happenstance along the way, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, what I really liked about your chapter, I think it shed a lot of light on, and you gave some really nice examples of, like you just did, of what these microaggressions look like. And I know, for me personally, reading all of the contributions have been so helpful, because there's all things, we all possess things, and it's part of our learning history. And it was nice to bring more awareness, right? Because I think of myself as being pretty aware, and I'm always trying to, like, check myself in situations, and make sure that I'm doing the right thing, so to speak. But then there's always more to learn. So I thank you for that, and I think as people go through the text and they read this chapter, they'll find a similar experience. What was interesting, though, that I found in the chapter was, how do we overcome this, right? So, like, what are things that we can do? And you talked a lot about in the workplace, but what are things that we can just do on an individual level, and then maybe as a field? It's like a two-part question, I guess.
Yeah.
With our background in behavior analysis, like, what are some things that we can do to become more aware and to help the situation on a more global level?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, especially um, on a behavior analytic level, right, we have to understand the functions of microaggression, right? Typically the function of microaggressive behavior or microaggressions are for attention, like 90% of behaviors are, and to also maybe escape a contentious environment, or to escape a certain individual, or to escape a certain environment. But especially in this day and age where social media runs rampant, where all you have to do is like post a video and you get all this attention from people that you don't even know, it's so easy to reinforce that behavior. It is so easy to reinforce microaggressions and any form of racism, because especially if behaviors are socially reinforced, it's hard to extinguish, because you're up against so many variables. So as a field, we have to put the behavior on extinction, right? So call it out. If it happens, call it out. If it happens, don't let that affect the person of color, or or tell the person who committed the microaggression, like, hey, that's not right, or hey, we need to check ourselves, or there's no room in this environment for that. You also have to like check your own biases on a personal level, which is gonna contribute to the workplace. Check your own biases, check your own culture, the community that you grew up in, and check how that affects who you are and how you view people, right? We all naturally have biases. That's human nature. That's who we are, right? We have biases to be in more comfortable situations, more comfortable communities that are same to us, whether it be same in our race and our ethnicity, same in our likes or our dislikes, right? So we all naturally have biases. The issue is not having biases. The issue is causing harm because of those biases, right? So we have to check ourselves and check the influences of our life, and we have to check those things that could be causing harm to somebody else because of our own influences. If we engage in behavior that dehumanizes, that harms, that cause emotional or mental damage to somebody else, even in the slightest sense, we have to be also okay with that being corrected, right? So after you check yourself, you have to be okay with that being corrected, because if not, you will never grow out of your own biases and come to understand how you are affecting someone else's life. So check your own biases, be okay with being wrong, and admitting that you're wrong, and correcting that, and then also being okay with communication. Sometimes, especially like you had mentioned, Michelle, some instances of microaggressions can be so inadvertent, so harmless. Not even people could commit microaggressions and not even know. But if we take the time to communicate, and really investigate those cultural differences, investigate those personal differences that could lead to microaggressions, then we can completely abate that instance from even occurring, because we would know better, right? Growing up, my mom would say, when you know better, you do better. You do better when you know better, right? So when you communicate with others regarding their culture, regarding things that matter to them, you do better. And I have a colleague who is, Christmas time just came around in December, and not everybody celebrates Christmas. And, if you're in a workplace and maybe Christianity or Christmas is extremely aversive to somebody, and you use that time to really promote Christmas and the excitement of it, and then dismiss somebody else's belief, or dismiss what they believe in. That's a form of microaggression, because you're using that time to kind of to make this holiday superior over somebody else's beliefs. But if you were to take the time to communicate that with somebody, and say, hey, I noticed that you're not, participating in the events, or you're not responding to things. Do you not believe in Christmas? Do you not celebrate it? How can we make the environment more comfortable for you to engage in, instead of just presuming that everybody participates in Christmas? And those types of communications, of being forward and being open, and approaching people that come from different cultures than you, can really abate any instances of microaggression from even happening sometimes.
I like what you touched on there, just about communication. And I think the overarching message there really is perspective taking,
Mm,
right? Just taking a moment to take a step back and notice, hey, this person's not participating. Like, are they just a Scrooge? you
yeah.
know, or is there something bigger at hand? Are they of a different faith, or do they, again, maybe they have some sort of trauma around that holiday? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not even appropriate for us to dig necessarily, but we can confront the situation in a way that's maybe appropriate, and try to figure out, so that, like you said, the environment is more inclusive for everybody, and that there's a more mutual understanding across the board, which kind of leads me down another path. Um, and there was a portion of your chapter about using ACT, or acceptance and commitment training. And what I really liked about, I say this in every interview, I'm a huge proponent of ACT. But what I really loved and appreciated about what you did with that piece was how you went about talking about ACT, and how, as like the person who's basically the victim, I guess, for lack of a better word, of a microaggression or a micro insult, how that individual can use ACT, so that we're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this was sort of my interpretation, of sort of the angle, but like, how when somebody commits an act against us, that we're not always coming right back at them with hatred or aggression or an insult or something like that. So I really appreciate it. I hope that was, if what your intent was, to kind of like come at it from like a different perspective.
Yeah, so actually, my co-contributor Stephanie contributed that piece of utilizing ACT to combat racism and microaggressions in the workplace. So I don't want to speak on her intentions, but I know that Stephanie and I have presented on a few panels together, and I know that her her stance is we can absolutely use ABA to combat racism, because ABA really is just the science that defines human behavior. I was telling somebody the other day, like, ABA is cool. I was like, ABA was happening before ABA was defined. Like, it was just already going on, and we've like put these technical fancy terms on things, on life that was already happening. And so Stephanie is a big proponent of using ABA to combat racism, to address it. And she always speaks highly upon ACT and the ACT model. But since she's not here, I don't want to speak on her behalf. But I know that she's a big proponent of using ACT to combat racism.
One of the things, maybe that maybe a follow-up question that you can answer, to not take away from her side of things, but um, just looking at ADA, and like you said, it's the science of behavior, right? And we can use it to address all behaviors. And um, what you kind of hit on, or what showed up for me, I should say, is that we can use it on both sides, right? We could use it, like, if somebody is a perpetrator, they could use the science, right, and the principles of ABA to shape their own behavior, to learn, right, to grow. And then also, if you're a victim of racism or of a microaggression, you can also maybe take a step back, and again, instead of maybe retaliating, say, okay, I'm going to look at this person through this lens. This is their learning history. Not to say that it doesn't hurt, not to minimize the pain or the suffering that this can cause and has caused for a very long time, and probably will continue for some time, but we're working on it, right? Like this is what we're trying to do with our science. But I like how it's twofold, right? It's like we're not just looking at this like one person has to change, right? We all have to be a little bit more flexible and understanding. And that was the one thing that I really loved and appreciated, like I said, about your chapter, because it was eye-opening on a lot of levels. And I think it made it very salient that we all need to be a little bit more open.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there anything else that you would like to add, like to that piece, just about any other strategies for shaping behavior on either side of that coin?
Yeah, it's so ironic that you brought that up, because I was just talking to, I think, my husband about some like recent incidents of racism that we've encountered in the community, and while they make me offended, and while I'm offended, and while I'm angry, I also take the moment to identify they have a different learning history. Those behaviors have been reinforced and not punished, and and that is what has happened in their environment. We all have different environments, right? And when we talk about combating racism, sometimes we have to break down the walls and the barriers of what's surrounding us immediately to look ahead of what or how we can interact with somebody else in a better sense. And so, the other day, like, we were out, and it was the wildest thing, like a micro real life micro insult. So I was actually at the grocery store, and I was picking up shrimp for my family, and there was an older white woman in the back, and there was a young white woman in front of me, and her interaction with the seafood tenant was it was much more positive, and so, but I wasn't expecting a tone change. So when I approached the counter, this woman, like, she immediately became cold affect, and those are some behaviors that I could look past, and because they're not directly causing harm towards me. However, she did move forward to say, I requested some shrimp, and then I had asked for it to be steamed because I was not going to cook it. And she then went on to tell me, well, if I steam it, it is now a taxed item. And in that instance, what she was actually referring to was assuming that I was paying for this item using government assistance, and that I would no longer be able to pay for this item because it was no longer considered like cold grocery. It was now warm grocery. And so I honestly just walked away, and I reported it to the manager, and I told them that I was no longer purchasing the shrimp. And as frustrated as I was, for my own sake and my own sanity, I acknowledge that this person has a different learning history, and that learning history has nothing to do with me personally. And that, that's okay. And I think to also be on a perpetrator side of things, you have to desire to want to no longer see people in a racist light, right? So to see people in a racist light, when we look at racism, racism says that one group of people is congenially more superior than any other forms or groups of people. And so to uphold that, like, we have to continue to either keep others up or keep others down, or simultaneously do the same. And so to break down those walls of racism, we have to break down that there are two groups of people that are like this and like this. And not even two, but I say two because this is one group and then these are all the other groups, right? There are subgroups within that group. We have to break down the wall of like one group is superior than any other groups, right? So you have to break down that wall of just because I'm of a certain race or ethnicity, I'm superior to others. And I think you have to shape that behavior in itself. You have to shape that behavior of understanding that I'm not the only race that could, that can accrue money in large sums. I'm not the only race that can get a higher education. And while maintaining that, also also promoting other people coming up, other people in the subgroup coming up or being promoted. So checking those behaviors, because like I said, to break down those walls of racism, we honestly have to meet in the middle, right? We have to understand that your learning history is not personal to me, and my learning history is not personal to you. But when we do encounter each other, we are still responsible for making sure that we do not promote racism in one another, and that we do try to make that effort to meet in the middle, so that way we can no longer have the superiority, inferiority sets of people.
So well said. That I think that really just hit home. Just so beautifully laid out. I think we tend to, and it is a complicated matter. You know what I'm saying? I'm not, again, not trying to minimize it in any way, but I think, a lot of what we have talked about in these chapters are really complex, right? They're systemic problems. They're huge problems. They've gone on forever.
Yes.
But when we sit and we have these conversations, it just seems so simple, right? Like sometimes it's just a matter of like, let me just be open. Let me just take a step back, from myself to see this person,
Yeah.
or to see even myself, and to understand what have my experiences been, and have that conversation and that communication. And well, what have your experiences been? Who has wronged you, and what has that looked like? And conversely, we all have a story, right?
Yeah.
We've all been through something. We've all had some sort of adversity that we've had to overcome. And I think if we can relate, even though our stories might be very different, but if we can all relate at that human condition level of like, we all feel pain, we all want to be loved, we all want to just like have that connectedness. um, and I think, again, to kind of spiral it back to ACT, which is what I just sort of do anyway, but if we just value being a good person,
Yeah.
and being open, I think we can have those conversations. Like, it's gonna take work, it's gonna take shaping, but if we can move in that more values directed behavior, I feel like there's a glimmer of hope, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And like you said, and I again value this so much. Like, don't be afraid of feedback. Again, you might say something that is harmless, right? Unintentional. You might think you're paying somebody a compliment, even, and you wrote about that in your chapter about somebody complimenting your hair. Um, you have a whole story behind that
Yeah.
that they're not aware of, and then when you bring light to that, and I've heard similar stories from other people, and I'm like, wow, like there's so much tied to that. There's so much hurt, you know um and anger, and whatever else, like emotion just behind that. So I think it's just it's we have to be more mindful. We have to be more open and willing to listen. And I appreciate your openness and your honesty, and like the examples, like your real life examples, not just like, oh, this is just a random example. I mean, these are things that you've experienced.
Yeah.
What's next for you, I guess, like in this realm, with trying to work on racism and microaggressions in behavior analysis? Like, what do you have in store, this next year and the next 5 years? Like, where do you see yourself contributing to this?
Yeah. So honestly, I wish that Jacob was on here so that way I could see him, because honestly, Michelle, like this really, like this fire when it comes to cultural humility, combating racism, really started when I went to Kenya with the Global Autism Project. in October 2019, right before the world shut down completely. And um, it was one of the best and like most humbling experiences of my life. It was actually really exciting to be a part of a community, even for a brief moment where like I was not the outlier. And having that feeling of not being the outlier for a second really sparked like, you know, even though I am an outlier, the only thing that me and the Kenyan community shared was like the color of our skin. I'm very much American. And the fact that they made me feel so welcomed, and it was, I honestly can't even put into words how welcome I felt. It was the best experience. I still keep in touch with some of the people there. It made me come back and reflect on how can we promote this type of inclusiveness back home, right? Like, how can we promote this type of inclusiveness back home? And in our field has, and I've always been very passionate about using ABA in school settings, because school settings are um, one of the hugest proponents, especially when it comes to marginalizing Black boys and Black girls. Data shows that, you know, school districts don't care about the reading of Black boys and Black girls. They don't care about their advancements, and that's just data. That's not a personal statement. That is literally just data. You can look at that anywhere. And and when I came back home, I was super blessed to be on a panel with Maui and with Maui Savant, Kim Edwards, Sean Capell, who also edited the book with Brian Connors, to talk about or to discuss, you know, how our field can move forward and be more culturally humble. And I think that that is my MO, is to how do I project the field forward and being a more culturally responsive and humble field. That is my MO, because we have to serve children, adults, we have to serve each other. And we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different ethnicities and communities. But that should not be a barrier for us to communicate. That should not be a barrier for us to converse, for us to collaborate together. And so that is my huge MO, is to set the standard of having a culturally responsive and humble field, of collaborating with others, of having representation of different diverse groups of people in leadership levels on the board. I mean, like, let's look at the board. How diverse is our board? How diverse are the people who are running these ABA companies? How diverse are the ABA programs that are recruiting people, right? So that's like, that has been my MO. Um, and it has been a super big push for me lately. And you know, I've done panels with ABAI and Dr. Megan Miller, who's also a contributor. Um, and uh, um, and so I guess what's next is just continue to like speak up and speak out and be a part of that. Like, to combat racism on a local level, you know, to continue to bring awareness. You know, I've introduced trainings at my own job, that weren't trainings before. I was like, listen, this is a problem. We got to address this. Like, we need to address this, which has gotten a lot of feedback. A lot of my team, well, actually, a lot of my techs were super, super happy, really happy that I did that, and that warmed my heart, because most of my techs look like me, but our leadership team does not look like me. I'm the only Black behavior analyst on the team, and so to have that training meant so much to them. And so I know if I can make that local type of change, that I can continue to make that change elsewhere with one step in front of the other. And so that's just really that's really all I desire to do is to collaborate and bring forth change, and to do good for the field. And especially as we continue to move forward and progress forward and reach other children, reach other adults, reach other sciences. And so that is my MO. And that is my passion. I do have a panel coming up with connections, behavior, and planning, with Camille Morgan. And then we'll also be joined by a few other panelists. I won't name them because I hate leaving people out, and I would probably do that. And that is coming up on the 16th of February. And then also be at ABAI doing a panel with some other incredible contributors to this project. And I'm just going to continue to open my mouth and speak out, and really just help the field move forward. You know, like all of my clients, I run my supervision business, and all of my clients are Black women, not like seriously, not by choice. It just really happened, and it makes me so happy that that I know that they're going to continue to grow the field and bring more representation, and that because of my stance on being culturally responsive, that they are also going to be culturally responsive practitioners one day. And that's just the type of change I hope to bring, and I hope to link arms with people who want to do the same thing.
You say it so casually, but it's such a big thing. You know, you're just like, yeah, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to, and I'm like, what? Like, that's huge. It's funny because you brought up Megan Miller, and we chatted with her the other day, and we were talking about, if you can't do better, we're going to make a bumper sticker, like, just do something,
Yeah.
So like we've talked a lot about that with everybody. And I think you're going about it in such a way where, like you said, like, I'm going to start at this level, and I'm going to start with my supervisees. I'm going to make them more culturally competent. And I mean, it for you, it's probably day life. You're like, yeah, I'm just kind of having these conversations with them and training them this way. But it's so important, and it's so needed. And I hope you continue to speak up, because I think you have a lot to say, and your message is really important. And again, you come at it from such a beautiful angle, where it's like it's easy to digest. It's sustainable. It doesn't sound like this big undertaking. It's just like, start here, and then you can keep going and just be open and listen, and fantastic. Definitely send us those links. We will put them up to promote anything that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Again, I know Jake is probably real sad that he, I don't know, lost Wi-Fi connection or whatever happened.
Seriously.
But yeah, I mean, you've been a wonderful contribution to this book. Fantastic to interview you, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Jacob. I am just really honored to be a part of this work and to be a part of this movement that is happening. It's needed. It is well overdue. It really sucks that it came off of the back of a few really difficult incidents. But like I said, it starts somewhere, and it's just one foot in front of the other. And I'm just gonna keep riding this train until it doesn't go anymore, and then I'll just push it with my own hands and feet.
I love it. And you're gonna have all those people that you locked arms with right there with you, pushing it along.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again, and we hope to hear more from you in the future.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I really appreciate you guys so much.